Terror attacks on 3 continents, and at least one of the terrorist suspects was once being tracked in France, but they stopped tracking him. That's why some here say we should let the NSA go back to tracking and gathering data on bad guys here to help stop them from doing something terrible here. Are they right? Hi, everybody. I'm David Asman. Welcome to Forbes on Fox. Let's go in focus with Steve Forbes, Mike Ozanian, Elizabeth McDonald, Sabrina Schaefer, John Tamny, and Bruce Jafson. Steve, started up again, the NSA surveillance?
Absolutely, David. What they have now is unworkable. The telecom companies don't know what they're supposed to be doing with this data, so it just makes it harder to do basic data mining. That's not listening in on conversations. All it means is if they see a pattern, then they have to go through various warrants and getting permissions before they can take it a step further. But it's a very useful tool, especially as terrorists now get more and more sophisticated about their own social media and communicating with each other in code.
Okay, so John, take this data away from the private sector and give it to the NSA. What do you think?
I don't like it. I think anything that limits the ability of government to act is a very good thing. The reality is if the NSA is tracking everything, it's ultimately tracking nothing, and there's no way for it to credibly know what is and is not a threat. I just don't like the idea of giving up so much liberty for really nothing in the return in terms of enhanced security.
Well, I don't know if nothing in return. Sabrina, look what's happening over there. They gave up focusing on this guy in France, and he ended up beheading somebody. And here, by the way, are the polls. America is divided, by the way, on this, because most people think the NSA prevents attacks, but they also think that it violates civil liberties. So it's kind of, you know, yes, you violate civil liberties, but you get the bad guys.
Well, right, and I mean, these 3 attacks that we just experienced are terrible. They're horrifying, and of course, I can understand why people are saying that we need to, you know, give the government even more leniency in terms of tracking down terrorists. But I sort of am sympathetic with what John is saying, that I think that, first of all, we need to be very careful. We were just having the conversation a year ago about the NSA Overreach. I think we have to make sure that we're not allowing government to have far too much control over their ability to eavesdrop on the American people. And at the same time, we can also get confused by we have so much data. You're apt to not find the pin in the haystack when that happens. I think very often we want smarter, more strategic investigations rather than just sort of these blanket eavesdropping of the American people.
EMAC?
Well, Senator Dianne Feinstein, Democrat from California, said that 54 terror plots were interrupted because of the NSA. The NSA had interrupted those plots in 2013, so that was 2 years ago. Listen, FBI, NSA have said that if they had this program before 9/11, possibly 9/11 could have been stopped. David, we live in 75 bioterrorist type threats out there, of Super Bowls, of marathons, of, you know, 4.3 million people riding the subways. We have more to fear from the IRS than from the NSA right now.
And Bruce, I'm just going to throw out another name. General Keith Alexander, he was the NSA director, said that there were 50 plots around the world that were stopped because of NSA surveillance.
Well, I think perhaps we might need more updates on that, because I think, you know, I don't agree with a widespread dragnet on the American people to gather information, but we probably need more updates on what bad guys are getting and so forth. I mean, I think what most people, when they hear about the NSA gathering information, they remember that we were spying on Angela Merkel, or that the late king of Saudi Arabia took fistfuls of Viagra. I mean, we need more information on how this is working.
Right, right. Well, Mike, you know, Milton Friedman used to say, in wartime, you have to give up some of your freedom. But we have been at this for a long time. I mean, 9/11, that was 14 years ago. If we have to go another decade fighting terror, does that mean another decade without some of our rights?
David, I think you hit the nail on the head. We are at war, whether the president realizes it or not. So I'm for this, for all the reasons that Steve and EMAC pointed out.
But, Steve, how long does this go on? Again, if we go on another decade in this war against terror, does that mean another decade of slow erosion of our freedoms?
David, this is not an erosion of freedoms. What the NSA is doing is not eavesdropping. They're doing data mining to see if there are patterns there that suggest that something wrong is happening. And then when they see such a pattern, they have to go through various procedures, warrants and the like, before they can take further steps. So in terms of defending ourselves, government does have the basic fundamental task of defending us, defending the realm. Right. And this is a good tool to do it.
Well, I think John may disagree, though, in terms of erosion of freedom. Is there no erosion of freedom going on, John?
Yeah, there's by definition erosion of freedom going on. Have to accept these counterfactuals offered by politicians that if we hadn't been doing this, we could have saved you from this. But the reality is the world is a dangerous place, and despite all they're doing, bad things are going to continue to happen. I don't like the idea of empowering the state in a way to look more and more into our lives. That's the quickest way to ruin a country, particularly one like the United States, if we're allowing what we were founded on to be eroded.
On the other hand, Emac, you look at the videos coming from overseas of these terror attacks, particularly one in Tunisia, when you have double-digit people murdered on the beach. If you begin to see that happening in America, I suspect it won't even become a question anymore.
Yeah, and I think you're right. It won't become a question anymore because people will realize that, you know, the NSA, there are a lot of good guys who work there. Listen, I don't like erosion of privacy. I don't like it at all. But what we're dealing with, let me give you one example. A co-conspirator in 9/11, before 9/11, was calling from a safe house in Yemen into San Diego. Security officials have said if they knew that was going on, they could have caught it and possibly unraveled the 9/11 plot.
Sabrina, I must admit, when you look at the videos of what's going on overseas, you think of that happening here. And again, we don't have to think too hard because there was at least one beheading that took place here in the workplace. So we have had that kind of terror, not on a massive scale like they are overseas. So, but if that happens here, I think the NSA is going to be given a free hand.
No, absolutely. Look, I mean, I think that we have to be extremely sort of sympathetic to what's happening around the globe and recognize that we are just as vulnerable, certainly. I think the question is, are we able to sort of toggle between civil liberties and national security? And we want to make sure that we, as you've said, we don't know how long this war is going to go on for. It's already been going on for more than a decade. So we have to make sure that the laws that we implement now are not going to fundamentally change the nature of this country 2 decades from now.
Bruce, this is what bothers me. I think everybody here, including you, by the way, you're more liberal than conservative, but I think we all share a fear of government overreach. We've seen it happen, whether it's a Republican like Richard Nixon or a Democrat like Barack Obama. It is a tendency of government to overreach. The longer we have these policies on the books and these practices by NSA on the books, in practice, maybe it becomes permanent and maybe they go overboard.
Well, I think what we need is, you know, we just had the whole debate in Congress over this and so forth. After a few months, we need some more specific examples of how this is working in our best interest, because we didn't really get the Feinstein example until they debated this, and people are like, okay, I guess I can get that. But we need more updates.
Okay, but let me ask Steve. Steve, you know what I'm talking about, government overreach. We talk about it all the time. We're going to be talking about Obamacare next. Isn't there a possibility the longer these policies are in place, the more they become embedded in our culture and do erode freedom?
Well, that's the basic thing about a democracy, David. You have to make sure government doesn't overreach. What the NSA has been doing in terms of data mining is legitimate. The real threat comes from agencies like the IRS or the EPA, which engage in gross overreaches and real actual threat to civil liberties. And in terms of privacy, Google, you can go on that and see somebody's backyard, for crying out loud.
That's true. That's true. It's happening whether we like it or not. Gang, thank you very much. Well, did the CEO of one of the largest insurers in America just tell us the government already has taken over health care in America, and it doesn't have anything to do with the Supreme Court ruling? That's next.